I've been asked to give a short and brief introduction of the VTT program which we participated in Vietnam shortly. So I'll just start off by going through a canned presentation. A vocational training team, or for short, a VTT, is a group of professionals that travel to another country to either learn more about their profession or to teach the local professionals about a particular field. In 2013-14 Rotary year, District 5360 provided a VTT grant of $7,500 towards the cost of sending a team to Vietnam to train parents and medical profession on the management of cerebral palsy. Officially, the Vietnam VTT ran from March 22nd to April the 6th. I traveled as a team leader as per Rotary requirement, representing Rotary Club of Calgary North and District 5360. I returned to Canada on Thursday, March 10th, along with one other team members and Laverne Bissky, who is the executive director of No Ordinary Foundation. No Ordinary Journey Foundation, sorry. Laverne is the founder of No Ordinary Journey Foundation, which is dedicated to revolutionizing the care, treatment, understanding, and acceptance of children and youth with cerebral palsy in Vietnam and around the globe. Laverne is also the mother of two children, Devin and Ksenia. Ksenia, who is 18, has cerebral palsy and uses a wheelchair. Laverne's family has traveled to 6 continents and spent over 32 weeks backpacking in Asia, Africa, South America. I would like to welcome Laverne to the stage to describe the wonderful experience we had working with the people on the ground in Vietnam. Deserve all the credit. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm good. Good morning, District 5360. It's fabulous to be here, and I want to take you on a little adventure this morning. As Paul mentioned, we got back early Friday morning, so both of us are a little bit jet-lagged. You also heard yesterday that there are Rotary clubs in 200 countries of the world. Vietnam is not one of those countries. And in fact, there was some concern about us doing a VTT in Vietnam. The grant was finally approved, and I don't know what Paul did to make that happen, but I'm eternally grateful. I want to introduce you to some of the people who participated in the VTT. And you're going to see quite a number of people, not all of whom were funded by the VTT. There were a number of people who were self-funded or just came along on their own. The very first person that I want to introduce you to is coming up right now. Her name is Mai Hoa Nguyen, and she's actually a Vietnamese person living in Vietnam, and she was critical to our operations there because, as you can imagine, it's really hard to put together a program from here. I learned so many things, and I think that all of our team did. It seemed like every 5 minutes there was something new to learn. But having someone competent on the ground that knows the system, knows the political system, was key. The next person I want to introduce you to, if my clicker works, is Barry Rowicki. And Barry is a rehabilitation physician. So he works with kids who have cerebral palsy and other types of disabilities. And he came to us from Australia. The interesting thing about Barry is that he didn't know us before this. So in this day and age of social media, I had sent out an email, Barry heard about what we were doing, figured he was a good fit, so he popped over to Vietnam to join us. I think he was quite surprised by what he saw there. In this picture, you will see he's examining a child who has cerebral palsy, and it's notable for a couple of things. The first one is these clinics that we did sometimes had the equipment that we asked for, sometimes didn't. You might see that Barry's actually examining this child on a boardroom table with a cover, a blanket that was taken off my hotel bed. That's the kind of conditions we were under. This child was 12 years old, and this was the first time he had ever been examined by a doctor. So that was notable as well. There may or may not have been motorbikes involved on this trip, by the way. Paul told me not to say anything about that. Lori Weldon is an occupational therapist. She's in Calgary. She's got 35 years of experience working with kids who have cerebral palsy. This picture is significant too. We got some donations and we were able to purchase some wheelchairs in Vietnam, which we then gave to some of the kids who really needed them. On this particular day, we had 5 wheelchairs to distribute. And I need up? They're telling me I'm not loud enough. We had 5 wheelchairs to distribute. And what we would do is we would pull aside 5 families and discreetly ask them if they wanted a wheelchair. Because sometimes they simply didn't. They believed their child would walk or whatever. In this particular case, 4 families wanted a wheelchair. We gave them away. A grandmother saw a family leaving the clinic with a wheelchair. Hi. Oh. Does this look as bad?
If everyone could look this way.
This is more interesting.
So getting back to kids with disabilities, one grandmother saw another kid leaving with a wheelchair, and she came back and she literally begged us for a wheelchair. This little boy had cerebral palsy, and he had been abandoned by his father at birth and by his mother when he was 1. And since then, his grandmother was raising him. But you know, without a wheelchair, the parents or the grandparents carry the child everywhere. And this poor, tiny little grandma was barely bigger than this boy. And we said, okay, we'll try it. We're not sure if this is the right size for him, but we did. And the grandmother was absolutely ecstatic. Imagine the freedom of her not having to carry this child everywhere. Lori is responsible for our wheelchair program in Vietnam. Catlin Bolina is a conductive education specialist. Conductive education is a specialized program for kids that have cerebral palsy. It combines all the disciplines of occupational therapy, speech therapy, education, physical therapy. So it's ideal for Hungary. You don't have, for Vietnam, because you don't need to have all these different people. And she came to us from Hungary. Keep pressing the wrong thing. Terry Garczynski is a social worker. He has many years of experience working as a facilitator. When he was a young man, I met him at university, and he was a caregiver for someone who had cerebral palsy. He introduced music to these kids, and you can see the delight of this boy who hardly ever smiled. Sue Brzezinski is a pediatric nurse, 30 years experience, 10 years working at the Children's Hospital with kids with cerebral palsy in Calgary. Timmy Lay was a last-minute addition. It's our policy, our feeling that we always need to have someone who actually has the condition of cerebral palsy on any of the work that we do. And we had with us a young man coming from Brooks, but at the last moment, his dad hurt his knee and he couldn't come. So we found Timmy, where you always find a good date, on the internet. So Timmy came to us from America, and he actually has cerebral palsy, quite a minor form of it, just affecting his legs, but he was a fantastic addition to our team. Tan Nguyen is the president of NOJF. He is a Vietnamese Canadian, lives in Calgary, helped us out with translations. Terry Kozlik is a videographer, works for Shaw. Shaw is going to be doing a documentary about our life and times and travel. So Terry came with us and did some video on that. Andy Weldon is the husband of Lori, key person, because he acted as our treasurer, and we really, really needed someone to just take care of that kind of stuff, because as you can imagine, a lot of transactions are done in cash in Vietnam, so it was really important to have someone to kind of take care of that. Am I still too quiet? People are saying yes. My husband's going, that's kind of unbelievable. I know he is. And of course, Paul, who is a fabulous addition to our team. Paul's great at keeping people's spirits up and reminding us to wear our life jackets wherever that's reasonable. And of course, me. And you know, I learned so much about Vietnam, but I learned more about myself on this trip. And what I learned is that my job was to be like a switchboard operator, to connect all these people. If you were paying attention, you noticed that we have people coming from Australia, from Hungary, from Vietnam, from America. All these people needed to know what was going on for months before their trip. They needed to be connected. And when somebody couldn't come, we needed to connect and find someone else. So that was my job. I also learned that there's a couple of really important things that are important to the success of the VTT, but are also important just in life and in business and all those kind of things. And connecting was one of them. We needed to have volunteer translators when we were in Vietnam. And of course, we don't have the money to pay for that. But Paul told me the next one, maybe. In Hue, one of the places that we visited, we got this fabulous team of volunteer translators. And you'll see one of them, the girl on the left, has cerebral palsy herself. And we met her 5 years ago when we traveled to Vietnam. I am going to come back to that, our whole family experience. So I'm kind of starting from where we are this week and working backwards. So I'll fill in the gaps for you. And the other volunteers who were all students, including the fellow in the middle, who is a student in the College of Medicine, and the girl in the red, who is actually a journalist in Vietnam. This team traveled with us to two places, Tre Vinh and Cao Cai. And you know what? The fellow second from the left is the nephew of our president. And he emailed me and he said, what can I do to help? And I said, we need translators. So mysteriously on the first day of the trip, this group of translators shows up, and then they tell us the story. He had put out a message on Facebook, and it was that, you know, I told two friends, and they told two friends, and so on, and so on, and so on. And the next thing you know, he's got this team of 5 translators. 2 of them traveled all the way from Canada to participate in this project. I had no idea this project was so interesting. One of them took a train for a day and a half from Hanoi to be with us. If you've ever been on a Vietnamese train, you'll know what a sacrifice that was. Huge. And the other 2 came to us from Ho Chi Minh City, which is relatively close. One of them actually is a physician, a respiratory doctor. So isn't that an amazing powerhouse team that I had nothing to do with putting together? And only 2 of them knew about each other beforehand. I think what it speaks to is the power of connection. And all of you young people in Rotaract and various different branches of Rotary, you have power. You can change things, and you are so critical to the work that the rest of us are doing, because you're not only young and enthusiastic and you have a lot of energy, but we had some really long, hard days, and those kids made it fun. They truly did. This is just one of the groups that we did. There were 30 parents in this group, 10 healthcare professionals, and we did 4 groups like this. But before I talk about that, I want to talk about what made this project so successful. Because, you know, when I committed to talking about this 2 days after I was getting back, I thought, you know, this might not go as it's planned. This might not go well at all. We're taking a big risk here. We're trying something that's never been done before. And I really want to commend District 5360 and the Rotary Club of Calgary North for taking a chance, for taking a risk. We all took a risk, and it paid off huge. And I'll talk about the results in a minute. But it's so fantastic to see Rotary partnering with all kinds of organizations. You know, working with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation on really big projects like polio, and taking chances and working with little old No Ordinary Journey Foundation. It's fabulous, and I think what it shows is the flexibility that Rotary has and the amazing things that happen because of your support. Going back to this project, we accomplished things that we couldn't even imagine. And I think it was Bob Hansel from the Rotary Club of Calgary North that said to me this morning, you know, sometimes things don't go as planned and they turn out even better. And that's what happened. What I learned is this, and maybe some of you have learned this lesson as well. What's so important is to believe in what you're doing. And I think what's besides that, it's not only important to believe in what you're doing, but to do what you believe in. And for me, there was no doubt of the value of what we were doing. There was no chance that it wouldn't succeed. It might be different than what I anticipated, but I just believed in it so deeply. And I think when you believe in something deeply and you're willing to go on an adventure, other people are willing to come with you. We all want to be on an adventure. The other thing is to work with people that you trust, to pick people that you trust to be on your team, to work with you, and to help you out. And I think one of the things that we sometimes fall down on is we pick people that we trust to work with us, but then we kind of give it to them and, you know, tell them run off and don't keep in close communication. And that was critical to our team. We were communicating all the time. It's so important when you're doing something new and different, right? Anybody ever tried anything new and different? Have to keep that communication flowing because the ideas are always flowing and you want to capture them as much as possible. So those are kind of the two really important things. But the other thing that I learned is that it's really important to let people have space, mental space, emotional space. It's really important to let them work out their own issues. There was no way that I, by myself, could have solved all of the things that came up on this trip because there were many. But I had this amazing team, and every evening we'd sit down and we'd say, what worked, what didn't work, now what do we do about it? We did this in a really careful way. One of the fellows, the fellow that I told you about that's a social worker, he's a facilitator, and he ran the debriefs. And there was a really important reason for that. That's because I'm the one that kind of organized things, right? So you want people to be able to speak freely, and I didn't want people to feel like if they said something, they were criticizing me. Although I have to admit, there were times when things didn't really work out and people said that and I got that little twang of, oh, it's all my fault kind of thing. But if you let people get through that, it's amazing what they'll come up with, the absolutely creative solutions. I've talked about, you know, some of the things like having to use the blankets and put them on the boardroom table to examine kids. That was only one of the things that didn't go according to plan. The first day, the first 2 days, when we were handing out wheelchairs at the end, the police came knocking, and they wanted to know exactly who was getting the wheelchairs. So I did what I thought was reasonable. We hadn't actually selected the kids, but I invited them to come in and to see the process that we were using. Now, oddly enough, asking them to stay and be part of it, they decided that maybe it wasn't that interesting, and they left and never came back. I'm not sure if that was an intimidation tactic or not. There were other situations where we were suddenly asked not to take any more pictures and to delete all the pictures that had been taken. There were a lot of political things in some places. We just didn't know what that was all about. The final thing that I think is so important is what you're doing here today and you did yesterday and especially last night is to celebrate what you're doing, to come together and share it and not only talk about what you can learn, but to share your successes and to share all the fabulous stuff that you're doing. That's what this whole weekend has really been about, hasn't it? And that's so important. Now I'm going to go back in time, and I'm going to tell you how this whole thing got started. But maybe before I do, there's a couple more things. I should just tell you what exactly we did in Vietnam, because you're probably kind of wondering. So this team of people, we went to 4 places in Vietnam, and our goal was to train parents and health professionals on how to manage cerebral palsy, because it's so lacking. They don't know what to do with these kids, and so they end up not seeing a doctor for 12 years. So we set up 2-day clinics, and we did them in 4 different places, 2 bigger centers and 2 smaller centers. And we did them that way for a particular reason. Paul told you that VTT send people to another country to either train or to learn. We did both. We trained parents, we trained healthcare professionals, but we also learned. So every person on that team spent 2 weeks with us learning about the conditions of kids with CP. What an incredible resource for us going forward. Even the people that aren't on the next trip are an incredible resource. They were there when the police called. They were there when we had all the issues. They saw these kids that haven't seen a doctor in 12 years. So we've got this incredible resource that we can now build on. We purposely went to 4 different places. One was poorer than the other, and we went to a bigger city and a smaller city in each place because we wanted to know what the differences would be. And that was hugely valuable because no place was the same as any other, which presented all kinds of challenges, all kinds of, as my friend Terry says, all kinds of learning opportunities. So, how did this all get started? They say that every one of us looks like someone famous, right? Like we just had Robin up here, looks like someone famous, right? Happens to be true in our family. You might be thinking that I look like the mom on the Brady Bunch. I also look like Ellen. I prefer Ellen. My husband David is here. He happens to look like Dr. Phil. With hair. Dave's a high school teacher in Calgary, and the one thing that we share is our deep, deep love of travel. We have such a deep love of travel that instead of buying me an engagement ring, he took me on a trip. How fabulous is that? Now, wouldn't you think that if Ellen and Dr. Phil got together, I know, not very likely, but if they did, don't you think that their kids would probably look pretty normal? You would think. We have a son named Devin. Looks like Sid the Sloth. How did that happen? We have another child named Ksenia, as mentioned. Ksenia looks like Ugly Betty. People are always a little reluctant to laugh at the picture of Ksenia because you already know she has a disability, but come on, isn't that cute? And now she's really beautiful because she has her braces off. So Ksenia was born 3 months prematurely, and as with many cases of cerebral palsy, we don't know why. The incidence of cerebral palsy is pretty much the same the world over. It doesn't matter if you live in Vietnam or you live in Canada, your chances of having a kid with CP are about the same. Cerebral palsy results from damage to the brain. Technically, cerebral palsy means damage to the brain resulting in a movement issue, but there can be many other things that are associated with it. Ksenia cannot sit on her own. She can't walk. She has a very difficult time speaking. She can't feed herself, can't go to the bathroom by herself. You're thinking, oh my God, what a lot of work. You're right. But it's traded off with the fact that she's a very clever girl. She's in grade 12. She goes to Bishop Carroll High School in Calgary, so she studies at her own pace. She loves high school. She loves all the things that every 18-year-old loves. She's kind of starting to like boys. She loves Facebook, likes to go shopping, that kind of stuff. If you've ever been around kids who have disabilities, you know that no matter what their limitations are, they all have their own unique strengths, and sometimes their strengths are pretty unique. When Ksenia was in elementary school, we went through the usual kind of, going through the spelling list, trying to teach her how to spell. And I remember one day she came home with this list of words, and they all had the same ending. So, we're getting at it, and I'm like, okay, Ksenia, how do you spell bake? And she goes, B-A-K. And I go, E. How do you spell make? And she says, M-A-K. And I go, E. Ksenia, how do you spell cake? She goes, C-A-K. What keeps happening to the E? What's wrong with the E? And she looks at me, Mom, it's silent. Kids, hey? You see, they have their own little way of thinking through things. Now, you would think that a kid like Ksenia, with so many complications, I didn't mention the fact that she doesn't sleep, she's had seizures, and she is also a type 1 diabetic. Did I mention that part? You would think a kid like her would kind of hunker in, do what she can, not worry too much about the rest of the world. Not at all. A few years ago, we were in Uganda, and we visited the Kampala School for the Physically Handicapped. At that school, they make beautiful clay beads, and they string them into jewelry. When we got home, Ksenia said, Mom, could we help the kids at the school? Could we bring some jewelry and sell it for them? So for almost 4 years now, that's what she's been doing. And today, her dad, Dave's out in the hallway, got his necklaces set up, doesn't really know what they're for, but he's happy. So you're more than welcome to take a look at it. We're really proud of Ksenia's project. We're really proud of the fact that she's persisted with this for 4 years and that she feels it's so important to help contribute to what other kids can do. So this is them at the school. They actually make the beads out of clay, they kiln them, they paint them, and they string them into the jewelry. Okay, so my husband and I both love to travel. And after a few months, it became evident that Ksenia's case of cerebral palsy would be severe and that she would never be able to walk. She would need the use of a wheelchair for the rest of her life. I think that's probably pretty devastating for most people. But I remember Dave and I talking, and I said, Dave, when I'm on my deathbed, I want people to say that we never let disability hold us back from doing what we wanted to do. So we love traveling. We took a few short trips. We went to Australia a couple times. After the second trip, Devin was about 12 at the time. He came home all excited. He really got onto this traveling thing. He's like, Mom, I have a goal in my life. And I'm like, 12? That's pretty good. Let's see where this goes. He says, my goal is to travel to all 7 continents while you and Dad are still paying for it. He goes to McGill. He's studying economics. Any surprise? So after we did a few small trips, you ever just had a longing, just an urge? You just want to do something. It's like an itch you can't scratch. You just know you have to do it. So I said to Dave, I want to do a family vacation, but I want to do something a little bit different. And like every dutiful husband, his response was,
Yes, dear.
he might have been thinking about moose jaw. He might have been thinking about Hawaii. He might have been thinking maybe even Machu Picchu. He didn't know. There was no way for him to know that I was thinking of 4 months in Southeast Asia. He couldn't take that back. So we did. We took our kids out of school. Dave took a semester off school, and we went to Southeast Asia for 4 months. One of the very first things that we did that was a highlight of our trip is we decided to go to the Great Wall of China. We landed in Beijing, and that was one of the first things. And it was one of those things, you know, have you ever done this family kind of stuff? I don't know, maybe you go to Disneyland, and you just know it's going to be fantastic, and for the whole rest of your life, you're going to talk about this beautiful family experience. That's what the Great Wall of China was supposed to be. The Great Wall of China, as you can imagine, is not wheelchair accessible. But we believed that we could do it. We believed so much that Dave found a way to make it happen. He took an old backpack, one of those, you know, hiking ones, a big one. He cut it apart and he made it into a carrier, kind of like a baby carrier, a big baby carrier that we could put Ksenia in. So Ksenia was 12 at the time, but she's tiny. She was like 60 pounds, right? She's a lot bigger than that now, as you can see. Anyway, Dave built this backpack carrier for her, and we were going to slide her in there, and we would take her to the Great Wall of China. Devin was really excited about it, too, and I was so happy that we were going to get to do that because I carry a lot of guilt. Guilt about the fact that Devin doesn't always get to do what he wants to do. He's made a lot of sacrifices in his little life because sometimes there are things that we just can't do because of Ksenia. But this was not going to be one of those days. So we get on the bus and we drive out to the Great Wall of China. And as you're getting close, you can see it snaking across the top of the mountains. It's fabulous. It's beautiful. When you get there, though, you're not at the base. You have to take a gondola. A couple people are nodding. They know what I mean. We didn't know this. We didn't know that you have to take a gondola. So we get in line for the gondola. We're standing there, and you know there's that whirr from the cables going by. I start to think to myself, wait a minute. Have my kids ever been on a gondola? Oh, crap. They haven't. They haven't. It's kind of a thing with CP kids. Sometimes they're okay with new things, sometimes they're not. I was afraid to look, but I did, and there's Ksenia. And she's watching people get into the cars and fly up the mountain. And she's got this horrified look on her face. If you've been around kids, you know they have their own little signs, right? Ksenia's sign is called the lip. She gets it from her dad. Comes out a little more, then it starts to quiver. And if it makes it all the way out, it's like a battery being charged. And when it gets fully charged, explodes. And there's screaming and yelling. And sometimes kids with CP have problems controlling their emotions, so it can go on for half an hour. We've had more than one family event ruined because of Ksenia's overreaction to something. While this is all going on in my mind, the car comes, we all jump in, we fold the wheelchair, and we go shooting up the mountain before any of us can think about what's going on. This is us just getting onto the car. Look at Devin's face. Does he know what's going to happen? What's he thinking? She's going to blow! She's going to blow. He knows it. He knows it. But we hopped on. Everything was okay. But we still had the lip all the way to the top of the mountain. And of course, I'm still thinking, Devin is not going to get to walk in the Great Wall of China. This backpack is never going to happen. We're not going to use it. Dave spent hours doing it. Now what do we do? We made it to the top. We pulled the wheelchair out, put Ksenia into it. Dave and Devin are bouncing around. They're so excited, want to go, want to go, want to go. Is that helpful for someone who's feeling anxious? No, no, no. So I'm like, okay, I'll tell you what, guys. Ksenia and I will stay here, and you guys just go. Just go, wander off, come back when you're ready. Dave says, are you sure? And I say, trust me. Trust your people. Trust your team. Trust me on this one, Dave. It was hard watching Dave and Devin climb step by step up to the wall and disappear. I felt sad. I can't tell you that it was any other way. But I noticed a big flat boulder by the wall. So I scooped Ksenia out of her wheelchair, and I put her on the boulder. And we sat there. And we had a beautiful view of the valley. And after a while, we started talking. We were just having a nice conversation, mother-daughter time. And then it struck me. It didn't matter that we weren't on the Great Wall of China. It didn't actually matter where we were. The only thing that mattered was that we were together. Have you ever done that, where you have a goal and you're so busy going so fast toward that goal that maybe you forget what's really important? Anybody have a Ksenia in your life? One of those people that you can only push them so far, and then they're like, that's it. That's as far as I'm going. I hope you do. Because sometimes they force us to stop and to think. And in the process of giving them space, we give ourselves space as well. Ksenia and I sat there for a while, and then this man came up and he said, can I have your email address? And we're going, creepy. He's like, no, 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 it's not like that, it's not like that. He said, I don't know why I did it, but I just took a picture of you, and I'd like to send it to you because I just sensed that something special was going on. And you know what? It really was. Later in that trip, we were invited to visit the village that a friend of ours had grown up in Vietnam. She wasn't sure that we should really go there. She said, it's really small. It's a 5-hour drive to get there. And Dave had lived in Jamaica when he was a kid, and he said to me, you know, be prepared for it to be different. We might be sleeping on mats in a grass hut with dirt floor. Probably won't have hot water. Food's going to be different. Maybe different's good. We said, what the heck, let's go for a week. And it was just like that. The village was basically a wide spot in the highway. Nobody owned cars. There were just paths between the houses where people walked and motorbikes would drive. But you know what? Our kids had an absolutely fabulous time because they could be with other kids. I mean, let's face it, they've been with their parents for 2 months. And we're like, some internal part, Devin. And he's like, okay, plops it back. He'd kind of adapted to the situation. They had a fabulous time. We went out to dinner every evening. The very last evening we were there, my family had gone ahead, and I was walking through the marketplace to get where we were meeting for supper. And the marketplace, you know, it's happening during the day. But this was evening. It was dusk. Everybody was gone. It was quiet. And when I say marketplace, I basically mean a wooden roof held up with posts made out of trees. It was quiet. There was just a little bit of smoke lingering from where people were cooking. But there was one woman sitting in the market with her child in her arms. When I saw this child, I guessed that he was about 10 years old. And I knew that he had cerebral palsy. It took me a minute to realize that we had been in the village and in the market every day for an entire week, and I had not seen this child once. Where was he? Where had he been? He had been in his house, only a few meters away from where we walked every day. He lay in his bed all day long, every day. The only time he left his house was when his mother was done with her business in the market and she could carry him out. And so they sat there in the evening. It broke my heart that my children were having the time of their lives, and this boy lay in his bed every day, all day long. And I said, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to go home, and I'm going to find a wheelchair, and I'm going to send it to him. And they will put the child in the wheelchair, and the little girls from the school will come over, and they'll push him around, and he'll be included. He'll be socially included. And I did it. I found a wheelchair, and I got it all packed up and ready to send, and I asked our friends to call and tell them that it was coming, and they did. And my friend called me back a couple days later and said, I'm really sorry, but the little boy has died. It would have been so easy if I had gotten him the wheelchair. How good would I have felt? Fabulous. I would have felt so fabulous thinking every day about this boy in this wheelchair. But it wasn't that way. And what it told me is if there was one boy in one village, there were many boys and girls in many villages in Vietnam living under those circumstances. Last summer, Dave and Ksenia and I spent 6 weeks. We took 6 weeks of our summer. We paid for it entirely ourselves. We traveled throughout Vietnam, trying to decide what No Ordinary Journey Foundation could do. Sadly, what we discovered is that the boy in the village was actually pretty well off because he lived with his family. Unlike so many children in Vietnam who are abandoned at orphanages, not because they don't have parents, but because the parents don't know what to do with them when they have a physical disability. Look at this boy's smile. All I had to do was talk to him, and I'm sure he was thinking, gee, that woman, what's she saying to me? This is a girl that was this was a particularly hard day for Ksenia because she met this girl who was 18 and had been left in an orphanage when she was 14. Now, I know we all have times when our 14-year-old makes us think, I wish there were still orphanages. But when you think about it, imagine what it would be like to be 14 years old and to be dropped at an orphanage because your parents don't know what to do with you. That's when we decided that when kids end up at orphanages, it's actually too late. And that No Ordinary Journey Foundation would work with families before they get to that point. Paul talked about the VTT. I'm just going to summarize because I think I have 2.5 minutes left. 4 minutes left? Okay. We went to 4 places. We worked with 100 different families in these 4 locations. We had 40 health professionals. We could have worked with many more families. We just didn't have the facilities to do that. We had journalists follow us in every one of those 4 locations. Our story is going to appear on national TV in a 20-minute talk show kind of a format, and hopefully a documentary next year. We're doing the Shaw documentary to raise awareness in Canada. We also are in the process of supporting one orphanage, and that's only because we have a really strong American partner that's willing to work with us. But the most important thing that we did on this VTT was we learned in depth from a number of different perspectives what needs to be done. That's the big difference between my daughter and a child born in Vietnam. You can't cure cerebral palsy, but you can treat it. And it needs a multidisciplinary team. I know Paul said to me, why do we have to take all these people? I said, because CP is not simple. Some kids need speech therapy. Some need physiotherapy. There's a number of different things that they need. And as I said, you can't cure it, but you can give them a fabulous quality of life if you work in these different areas. That was the thing that we really accomplished this year. We visited, kind of accidentally, a place called Nha Trang. And in Nha Trang, we visited with the health department. That was a huge, huge step for us because, of course, to have broad expanse of work there, we need to connect with the government. What we're looking at doing for next year is establishing a center of excellence in Nha Trang. Many of you, I saw you guys wearing your District 9200 ties. Talk about celebrating for those of us that went to Uganda a few years ago. What a fabulous memento. That's the kind of thing that we're looking at doing, is establishing a Kalika-type model of excellence where people can be trained and then they go back and work out in their communities. We're also going to look at some intensive training starting next year for health professionals and parent training at that center. First ever CP conference in Vietnam next year. And we're working with the national TV channel to do a 6-part TV series which will be aired on public television. That day that Ksenia and I sat beside the Great Wall, I marveled at how amazing that thing is. It runs for thousands of miles. And yet the Great Wall was built brick by brick. Relationships are built moment by moment. We sat there by the Great Wall for quite a while before Dave and Devin came back. Ksenia had time to kind of mellow out. We gave her that space I was talking about. So when they came back, Dave said, "So, Ksenia, are you ready to go in the Great Wall?" She said yes. So we slid on the backpack carrier, we put her in it, and for just a little while, we were able to leave the wheelchair behind. And together, the 4 of us climbed, step by step, up to the Great Wall and disappeared. It's been an honor to share some of my adventures with you.
Absolutely. Please stay here on the stage.
Thank you.